I'd like to introduce my two guests today on the Israel Connection. Firstly, I welcome Peter Stano, who's the lead spokesman for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy at the European Commission. And I understand, Peter, that you're part of the European External Action Service press team, which provides the key contact point for journalists interested in European Union's foreign affairs and security policy, which is why I contacted you. And you provide information about policy priorities, proposals and decisions to the media, organise media events and issue press material and statements. So welcome indeed to the program, Peter.
Thank you.
And as well today we have Naomi Kahn, who's Director of the International Division of Regavim, which is a public movement which is established with the aim of leading to the establishment of a Jewish and Zionist agenda for the State of Israel in terms of land and environment. Naomi was a guest of the Australian Jewish Association, which is a major organisation in Australia, and I recommend those who would like to know more about the nature of your work, Naomi, that they track down the video from that event that took place in December last year on the AJA Facebook page.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for inviting me.
So now, if I can start with you, Peter. I shared with Naomi and you an article that I came across, which was written by Hugh Lovett, who is a policy fellow for the European Council on Foreign Relations. The article, which is titled "The End of Oslo: A New European Strategy on Israel-Palestine," says Europe is failing to fundamentally challenge the worsening situation on the ground, which is storing up future instability and threatens European interests. According to Lovett, the EU, instead of its rigid focus on the Oslo peace process, should craft a new peacemaking paradigm based on equality and deoccupation. So that's the position in this paper. Now, where do you say, or where does the EU stand today then on the Oslo Accords, Peter?
Well, thank you very much, and hello, everyone. Well, this is the amazing thing about the European democracy, that there are a variety of views about what the EU should do or shouldn't do, and how we should proceed on various issues and open wounds on the world stage. But the bottom line, what people need to understand, that what the European Union is doing is basically based on the agreement and consensus of 27 EU member states. You know, so people tend to see EU as one entity, but it is an institution in a way, but it's an association of 27 member states. And when it comes to our actions on the world stage, we all, the 27 member states, need to agree what to do and how to do it. So currently what we are doing is to be engaged in the Middle Eastern peace process as someone who is an honest broker, who is ready to do whatever we can to support Israelis and Palestinians to return back to the direct negotiations, because we will not be imposing solutions. You know, any sustainable, peaceful solution needs to be worked out between Palestinians and Israelis. And this is what we are focused on, based, of course, on the international agreed parameters, which for us as a community respecting rule of law and international order are the relevant UN Security Council resolutions and the basic principles of the international law, including international humanitarian law.
Well, notwithstanding the fact that there are some differences between countries in the EU, you don't have a totally unanimous perspective on what's going on. But if I can go to you, Naomi, last year we saw that the EU played a significant role in opposing Israeli plans to formally annex some 30% of the West Bank. And despite perennial divisions among member states, European diplomats managed to muster international opposition and mobilise the EU's diplomatic machinery. So why is Regavim very concerned about the role that the EU is playing in the Israel-Palestine arena?
This is true. They managed to muster a unified response. But I think that going back to the article that you referenced by Lovett and Mr. Stano's comments illustrate really some of the most basic problems here. One of the most basic problems is, first of all, the entire conversation focuses on only one possible solution to the conflict. And I think that that is a bit childish. The Oslo Accords at no point mandate a two-state solution. They don't call for a two-state solution. And I personally don't believe that a two-state solution should be considered the only option moving forward. I don't think it's a realistic option for many, many reasons. I don't think it's appropriate for the Middle Eastern realities that we're dealing with. And I also don't believe that basing the entire conversation about moving forward on the principles of deoccupation, when we don't believe that the conversation should involve the term occupation in any case, and it has been the long-standing policy of the Israeli government and international law, that the territory in question is not occupied by the state of Israel. So the very basic foundations of the conversation need to be re-examined if you want to have a path forward in any meaningful way. The fact that the European Union insists that there is only one resolution here, I think is a part of the problem. And that makes it, again, although Mr. Stano talks about being an honest broker, I don't believe that the state of Israel sees the European Union that way at this point, for those reasons that I've stated. The entire basis of the conversation being that Israel is an occupier is false. And the entire conversation about the situation on the ground worsening because of Israeli actions is false. And the conversation of the European Union being only a broker and not imposing the solution is patently false, because the European Union actually funds changes on the ground that are illegal, funds massive illegal Palestinian Authority activities in the areas under Israeli jurisdiction under the Oslo Accords. So the European Union is not really an honest broker if they are enabling and encouraging illegal activity in Area C that violates the Oslo Accords and makes a peaceful resolution far less likely every day. That's unfortunately, that's the situation that we see on the ground. And we've documented tens of thousands of illegal structures funded by the European Union, tens of thousands of acres of land that have been taken over illegally by the Palestinian Authority with the aid of the European Union, hundreds of illegal schools and public institutions built without Israeli approval in areas under Israeli jurisdiction, funded by the European Union. These are all shifting the balance and making the return to a negotiation completely unlikely. We'd hope that the European Union would re-examine its policy of supporting the construction of a de facto Palestinian state in Area C, which undermines the entire process of negotiation.
Well, there's certainly a lot there to deal with. Peter, do you want to respond to what Naomi has said?
Well, again, as I said, I mean, the fantastic thing about the European Union is the total respect for the variety of opinions. I absolutely disagree with statements of Madame Kahn, because it's absolutely not true that the EU is engaged or supporting any illegal activities. But again, I mean, this is just an example how it looks that we are living in completely different universes. You know, talking about the same problem in completely different parameters. What I was trying to get across, and what is the basic position of the European Union, is that we are not imposing solutions. We are ready, and what we have been doing all the time, and we are ready to do even in the future, is to encourage both sides to sit down for direct talks, because no one else, only Palestinians and Israelis, will be able to sort out the solution, the workable and sustainable solution for the benefit of not of the Europeans, but of the Israelis and Palestinians, so that finally you can find a way to live together, reconcile all the past wounds, and live like a normal civilized nation side by side, governing your own things without any injustices and mutual accusations that you are doing this to me and you are doing this to me. I mean, the EU is acting in line with the EU principles endorsed by 27 member states, community of advanced, mature democracies respecting rule of law. We are acting in line with the international law. If there is someone thinking or claiming that we are engaged in illegal activities, you can use the legal framework of the European law, of the international law, to challenge it and to prove us wrong. But at this stage, I really firmly have to reject accusations that the EU would be engaged in funding, supporting illegal activities by the Palestinian Authority. And let me recall again the basic position. We are not sticking to Oslo for any price. despite the rejection of Palestinians or Israelis. We are not sticking to formulas that we want to push. We are saying what we have at this stage are the relevant Security Council resolutions, the agreement so far, that need to be respected. And if you want to do something else, okay, do it. But we will continue to support all efforts aimed at revival of political process, which ensures equal rights and which is acceptable to both parties, So this is the bottom line of our position. We support anything what Israeli and Palestinians agree in mutual direct talks, and they are fine with the agreement, with the final agreement, satisfying them both, ensuring equal rights and being in line with international law. So this is the basic position. And again, the EU will support whatever the 27 member states agree on. Currently, the consensus and the position is as I outlined. But again, we are not imposing anything on anyone, because in the end, the issue needs to be solved in direct talks between the two main actors, and these are Israelis and Palestinians.
Well, if I can just point out that the EU made a submission to the United Nations Security Council only a few days ago, where it reaffirmed its commitment to a just and comprehensive resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it's based on the two-state solution. So you are fixated and insisting on this particular model when there are other approaches. But I want to go, if you don't mind, to a concern that Naomi has expressed, that about the EU, in fact, building, as she says, a lot of infrastructure in Area C of the West Bank, which is preempting a solution to the conflict before the Middle East peace process has formally achieved any tangible agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. This means that, according to Ambassador Alan Baker, who's been a guest on my show a couple of times and is director of the Institute for Contemporary Affairs at the Jerusalem Center of Public Affairs and the head of the Global Law Forum, he participated in the negotiation and drafting of the Oslo Accords with the Palestinians, and as well as in agreements and treaties with Egypt, Jordan and Lebanon. He's written that Belgium, and I'm sure they're not the only European country doing this, in particular, is providing financial and political support and sponsorship to what Naomi would refer to as being illegal Palestinian construction projects in Area C of the West Bank, and is demanding compensation when Israel's dismantling these illegally constructed buildings, according to Belgian authorities. So, Peter, what do you make of these accusations?
Well, again, I can only repeat what I said. Like, if anyone has a feeling that the EU would be engaged in illegal activities or supporting illegal activities, you have fantastic legal framework in EU itself where you can challenge it. You have international forums where you can challenge it. So far, again, I think we are living in parallel universes, and we are hearing that Palestinian Authority and the EU are able to do whatever they want on Palestinian territories, whereas we want that the Palestinian Authority has not 100% full control over Palestinian territories under current circumstances, and this is the international consensus. So again, what we are funding, what we are doing, all our support is not only in line with our principles as a community of 27 democratic states, but also in line with international law. And then again, we have such a strong control mechanisms here. We control ourselves. We have European Parliament, which is institution independent from European Commission or External Action Service. There are over 700 MEPs. They can exercise control. We have independent auditing body, which is controlling all the financing projects. We have individual member states who have also insight and who can challenge anything the EU is doing. So the EU is really, I mean, we can sleep with a clean conscience of sticking to the rules, respecting the law, not only European law but also international law, and trying to help the Palestinians on their way to build necessary structures to prepare them for the eventual statehood in whatever form it will be, based on a mutual agreement with the Israelis. It's not that we are fixated on two-state solution, but this is so far the best alternative that is on the table and that is internationally agreed. There is international consensus. If there is a better alternative, more sustainable alternative offered and on the table, the EU will be the last one objecting to it. I can assure you, I mean, bottom line for us is direct talks and mutually agreeable compromise. That's it.
Naomi, would you like to respond?
I would indeed. in my meetings with European parliamentarians, including those who sit on the Budgetary Commission, they were completely shocked to see where European money is going, where the European Commission's budget is being used, when it's being used for humanitarian aid, which ends up building illegal structures in areas under Israeli jurisdiction, and not being used to develop the institutions of democracy within the Palestinian Authority itself, to actually change the map and to make a negotiated solution impossible simply by laying facts on the ground. The European parliamentarians themselves were shocked by the simple satellite imagery that we brought them, showing the massive growth of illegal construction in Israeli-controlled areas. So rather than saying that the European Union's sole purpose is to encourage the sides to go back to the negotiating table, what they're doing in practice is giving the Palestinian Authority every reason not to negotiate and to use the vacuum that's created in terms of the time that's going by to simply change the map de facto, to the point that any negotiated solution will have nothing left to negotiate about. The change on the ground is dramatic, it is drastic, it is massive, and it is one-sided. The Palestinian Authority has far outpaced by 100% the rate of expansion within areas that are under Israeli jurisdiction under international law, no matter what you call that jurisdiction, be it sovereignty, be it occupation, no matter what it is, even under the Geneva Conventions, an occupying power has the responsibility to maintain law and order in the occupied area. And the occupying power also is the sole authority to issue building permits and to create infrastructure. And the European Union is completely violating the very basic principles that are involved in Israeli jurisdiction and the international law, which was set out in the Oslo Accords, to which it is a signatory. So saying that you encourage negotiation while in practice encouraging non-negotiation is it's a very dangerous game, and it's laying the groundwork for an inevitable conflict, for an inevitable violent conflict that cannot be resolved through negotiation. If the European Union were an honest broker and were really interested in encouraging both sides to negotiate, it would stop funding illegal construction and illegal agricultural projects and illegal infrastructure projects in areas under Israeli jurisdiction. And we're talking about hundreds of millions a year that are being poured in to these projects, both by member states individually, by the European Union as a whole, by the United Nations. This is not honest brokership.
So would you say, Peter, that by preempting a solution like you've been indicating along certain lines, that this is leading to a situation that Naomi's been describing, that the EU is building structure, anticipating a Palestinian state, but this is causing a lot of conflict between the EU and Israel because there isn't a basis yet for such construction without any agreement in place?
Well, I mean, listening to this, it looks like the Palestinian Authority, with the help of European Union, is gradually invading, expanding, and occupying Israeli territory, and Israel is powerless to do anything against it and stop it. I mean, we can go on endlessly. Madam Kahn accusing the EU of stuff, and me denying it and saying this is completely baseless and unjustified, and it's simply not true. But this goes, I mean, this just illustrates the substance that there is a deeply rooted conflict with so deeply entrenched views, which on some sides you cannot change with any argumentation. And this should be the incentive for everyone involved. And we are not involved. We are not the actor of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So this should be the incentive for all those on the ground, on the Israeli side, the politicians, the parties, the civil society, the associations, the lobby group, settlers group, everyone, and Palestinians on the other side, including the reconciliation between Hamas and Fatah, to sit down and find solution for themselves. And this is what we are advocating, what we are doing. Our support to Palestine, or to Palestinian Authority is to prepare them for the statehood. It's not only building the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, it's also good governance. It's also helping them with the salaries. It's also with education, healthcare, etc., etc. So this is also support based on the humanitarian needs, just the basic humanitarian needs. Because I think we agree, despite all the differences, that people in Palestine actually don't live in full freedom. They don't have the 100% rights. That they don't govern their things 100% freely as any other nations. But again, not true that we are supporting Palestinians in not negotiating. We are pushing them very hard to go back to the table, as we are pushing the Israelis. We are pushing very hard for the reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas. We are supporting very strongly the upcoming Palestinian elections, for which, by the way, we have not received any reply from Israeli authorities when we requested the access for the election observation mission in order to support the normalization of the situation when it comes to building the democracy on the Palestinian territories. So these are all complicated issues, and we can accuse each other of wrongdoings, etc., etc. And this will go on because we don't listen to each other anymore. This will go on until there are direct negotiations and Israelis and Palestinians sort out the issues among themselves, because you will be living together. It will not be us living there. We are not moving EU to the Middle East. So it's in your interest to sort it out in an honest way, finding an acceptable consensus. It will be very difficult, but I can only repeat that EU will be always standing by Israel and always standing by Palestinian people in their honest efforts to find a solution, because it's a solution for yourself, for the benefit of Israeli people and Palestinian people. And the history of the EU teaches us that it is worth to invest the efforts in reconciliation, because EU emerged from brutal wars in Europe, which cost hundreds of millions of lives over centuries. And together we are a community of free nations living together, working together. And I believe this is possible also for Israel and Palestine.
There's a supposition, I suppose, that we're dealing with another party which is sincere in its negotiations and practicing towards the establishment of a state. The Palestinian Authority has squandered many billions of dollars that the European Union has provided over the years. I went back to an article in 2013 that showed through corruption, mismanagement, it was reported in a British newspaper that there was a huge amount of money that had been squandered, and this was picked up by European Court of Auditors, and was set up to establish what was actually going on and how much money was being wasted. The Palestinian Authority is noted for corruption and malpractice, so much pocketing of funds that are coming their way is not going in the right places. Are you really confident that the efforts you're making, Peter, are really going towards helping the Palestinians, or just feeding their corrupt practices?
If I might add a subtext to that question, in addition to squandering and corruption, the question is if those funds are not going into actual support for terrorists, for payment of salaries, for the pay to slay program that the United States has actually outlawed. We've had a tremendous amount of documentation which was presented to the European Union about some of the non-government, quote unquote, humanitarian and education organizations that they're funding that are actually terror affiliates. They're affiliates of the People's Liberation Front for Palestine, which is an internationally sanctioned terrorist organization. So even the funding that is coming through as humanitarian is being used by people who proclaim loudly, publicly, and clearly that their objective is to wipe the state of Israel off of the map, and people who are carrying out actual murderous terrorist attacks against Israelis who are receiving salaries from European countries and the European Union as a whole. So that's an addition to your question.
Well, let me
actually, yeah.
You,
thank you.
Peter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was about to say previously that, I mean, it should be probably fair to give Madame Kahn the space because I talked for too long. So yeah, indeed, I mean, thank you for this question. This is indeed something which is high on our minds, and this is one of the concerns we are trying to address continuously. And this is why we have all these checks and balances that are able to identify problems. If there is a problem with our funding, if the money is channeled to purposes which are not in line with the designated objectives, of course we try to correct it. So I wouldn't say that 100% of our funding goes to 100% of the objective we allocated to. I cannot exclude that. Of course, there might be isolated cases where the funding might be either misappropriated or not used to the purpose it was designed. But we try to address it. Bottom line, this is not the policy of the European Union to finance terrorists. And every time, if we have credible evidence, an indication that it is the case, then we try to act upon it. But bottom line is that when we allocate the aid, we make strong conditionality, and we have, I think, strong measures in place to prevent this happening on a wide scale. When it comes to corruption, of course, I mean, corruption is a huge problem. But again, Palestinian Authority is operating under circumstances determined by the occupation. You know, it's not full-blown democracy. Everyone knows that. We have problems with corruption within the European Union. This is something that has something to do not really with the political affiliation or political maturity, but with the human nature. You will always have someone who is corrupt and always someone who wants to corrupt other people. So this is something, again, we are not supporting, we are actually fighting decisively against it. We face this problem not only in Palestine, we face it also in other countries where we are working and where we are providing assistance. But this is the ongoing effort, and we try to adapt on the go that all the and make sure that all the money, all the programs is used in line with the task and with the objectives. And if there are shortcomings, if there are misdeeds, we try to address them. And that's why it's important to have these control mechanisms, which we have, and the willingness and resolution to act, which we also have. But it's not true that 100% of our funding goes for activities which are related to terrorism or destruction of the state of Israel.
I did not mean to imply that 100% goes to illegal activity. Certainly far from that. My question is whether or not the money that does come through would be better used. For example, we did a very careful study using purchased global images, satellite images, to see how much of areas A and B, the areas under Palestinian Authority control, actually is developed to ease the housing crisis and humanitarian crisis that European money is coming to address. And we found that close to 80% of available land reserves in areas under the Palestinian Authority's jurisdiction are empty. And the Palestinian Authority instead uses all of the money that it receives from the European Union to actually build in areas under Israeli jurisdiction illegally, rather than using those funds in areas under its own jurisdiction where they don't need any Israeli permits, there won't be any threat of demolitions, and it will certainly solve any housing and humanitarian crisis far more effectively. But instead, it's using that European funding specifically in Area C and solely in Area C, in areas that are prone to demolition. The European Union knows full well, it adds into its contracts that in cases of demolition, because it knows very, very clearly that it is funding construction without permits in areas under Israeli jurisdiction. So I think that even the money that's not going to terrorism, it is being used actually in the wrong places. It could be used far more effectively. We are completely in line with the EU's objectives to ease the humanitarian situation for Palestinians, but that should be done in the areas under Palestinian Authority control, first and foremost. That's where most of the Palestinians live. And I think that the money would be used more effectively and more legally if it were used there, but it is not. I encourage you to have a look at our recent reports and our recent analysis of the satellite images to see where the construction is happening. When you begin to see where the money is being used, you understand why it's being used there. And the aims are political and not humanitarian.
I understand that Peter's got to run. He's got another appointment. Do you want to wrap things up from your point of view, Peter?
Just very briefly, I mean, it seems again like the Palestinian Authority is building illegally on Israeli territories, and Israel is not able to do anything against it. So it's really, I mean, it's a little bit strange. But when it comes to the funding, we welcome any input that can make the use of our funding more efficient to help the Palestinians. Let's not forget that the EU is 27 member states. Most of them have presence on the ground, both in Israel and in Palestine. So we go around, we see where are the needs, and we control things. And you might have a view as an organization representing a certain group of people, but then the EU is 27 member states. So I think we trust our judgment as 27 member states with different interests, with different affiliations to Palestinians and Israelis. But if 27 member states are okay with the way how the funding is being used now, then I think that's relatively more objective than just the assessment we heard from Naomi. So, but bottom line is, again, we will not solve these issues in arguing about whether 100 euros have been used there or there, whether we are engaged in that activity or in that, unless we solve the core of the problem. And the core of the problem, unfortunately, for over 70 years, is the unjust situation in the region where people of Israel and Palestine cannot live in peace and security because the politicians are not able to work out the workable and sustainable solution. And this is what we are asking for and encouraging. Direct talks, finding a compromise that serves both for the benefit of the people, because in the end, it's the people paying the price of this unfortunate situation. It's not us in the EU directly, it's the people on the ground, both.
Well, I just wanted to say that there are very few countries in the EU that have accepted the existence of a Palestinian state yet. I think Sweden was the first, and most others are still not prepared to go that way. But we can argue about these points that we've been raising for much longer, but we don't have the time. And I'd like to thank you, Peter and Naomi, very much for participating today in our discussion. And I very much appreciate hearing your points of view and sharing those with our viewers.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for this discussion.
Thank you. If you want to stay at all for a moment, Naomi, to have a final word?
Yeah, I just want to point. Okay, I'd just like to point out that Mr. Stano's final comments were essentially an encapsulated, updated version of European colonialism. I think that the Europeans, I don't see why they think that they can impose their quote unquote objective opinion on the people who are living in this part of the world. They are not going to have to deal with the consequences, and we're not willing to take the risks that are involved in blindly accepting their idea of how we should be living and with whom. I find that insulting colonialism. Israel is a sovereign state. We have fought to regain our sovereignty and our independence. We have earned it. We have nothing to prove to anyone else. We are a modern, democratic state and equal among the nations of the world. And I don't think that we need the European Union to tell us how we should be living with the people who are trying to wipe us off the map. I think that's condescending and colonialist ideology. If they are truly interested in helping the members of the parties to the conflict reach a resolution, they shouldn't be aiding and abetting the one-sided changing of the map, exerting tremendous pressure on the state of Israel, and then being surprised when Israel doesn't stand up to the powerful union of 27 European nations. It's quite condescending, and I, for one, as a proud Israeli, I'm not willing to accept that.
I already said everything previously. This is just an example that we don't listen to each other. I said we are not imposing any solution. As I said, I mean, any solution needs to be worked out between Israelis and Palestinians. If this is imposing a solution, then really, I mean, there is no point to discussing further. But anyway, I have to run now. So thank you very much for this discussion and for your interest in EU's positions. And let's speak again in the future.
Yeah, thank you again. And thank you very much, Naomi. It's been a very interesting exchange of views.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for hosting me.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.